Okay, so good evening and good afternoon for those of us who haven't quite reached the evening. I appreciate everyone taking some time to join us today. What I've done is started recording this webinar session, so it will be made available post-presentation in the next couple of days on the Rugby Canada website or YouTube page, one or the other. We'll sort that out, but I won't have access to it until at least a couple of days from now anyways. So we'll go from there. But for those of you just joining us, and you have not used GoToMeeting before, what you will see is a bit of a dashboard or control panel, and it should have a couple of features. One is a question box, so you can type questions as we go. However, what I'm going to do is run through the length of the presentation and then take questions at the end. So for those who have a burning question, I would suggest leaving it until the end and typing it, because it's just easier for me to answer questions at the end as opposed to as we go. That way we make sure we stick to time, and then we go from there. You should see a handouts tab, and then you should see 3 video clips in it. What I will do is go through the video clips during the presentation, but because of the lag that can be seen sometimes on the viewing end, what I've done is attach these clips as attachments into this document. So hopefully they should work fine. And then the recording of the presentation, the video should work fine for those who want to watch after the fact. All right, so with that, if anyone has any questions on how to use the system, please don't hesitate to type that in, and I'll try and answer as I go through this presentation piece. But in the meantime, what I'll do is just get started, and then we can go from there. So welcome again to tonight's webinar on our, we're gonna do a module 1. So game preparation and review. A couple tips and tricks on how we can get ready for our matches in between weeks, and look at a little bit of a process to help us all be able to achieve that. All right, so our objectives tonight, there's a couple of things that we're gonna try and touch on. The first is hopefully you will all have attained a background into why we have a 2019 Match Official Professional Development webinar series. So I'll just give a bit of an explanation as to how we got to this point and what are some of the features of the next 12 or 11 modules after this one at least. You will also be able to use or have an opportunity to use the referee feedback form to both prepare and review for your matches. Now, we won't be using it actively as a group tonight, but the form will be made available online, and I'll show us how we can get a hold of that. Hopefully you will have an understanding of how to deliberately practice some of these areas that we've identified on improving. And then we're also just gonna have a quick reminder of the importance of player welfare and some of the resources available. There will be some separate webinar content on player welfare and player safety and foul play and the management of that and decisions and thresholds and all that kind of stuff. But for now, what we're gonna do is touch on the resources that are currently available, how we can access them, and just re-emphasize that it should be a part of how we go about preparing for our matches. So just a bit of a background as to why we got here and what our objective with this webinar series is. So when we collected feedback at the end of last year, we had something just over 400 respondents provide some sort of input as to where they thought refereeing was in Canada. And the majority of that feedback that came back touched on a couple of things. One was consistency in some areas of the game, which is a natural thing, mostly because we're all different individuals, and so we will referee slightly differently. But that doesn't mean we don't want to try and bridge the gap when it comes to accuracy of decision making, or what we deem to be accurate decision making across the board. So what we'll do is I'll explain how we're hoping to get there, but that was one of the issues that was raised. And the other one was foul play and dealing with foul play appropriately. So what I'll do is I'll explain how we're going to integrate some of that feedback into this content. And the other piece of feedback was that there was a desire for more content, right? Things that were more readily available for referees to be able to digest, or the game in general, coaches, players, and hopefully there's a few of you guys on this webinar as well. Excellent. So what we're looking for is to try and establish some consistency in improvements. So what I'm getting at here is not that we're going to try and have everyone referee consistently across the board just yet. I think what we're going to try and do first is establish how do we ask referees to go about trying to improve on a week-to-week basis. If we can improve the consistency in how they look at those areas of the game, or look at their own areas of the game that they need to improve on, then what we can hopefully do is tick a few more boxes as the season goes on. So that'll be the goal through this process over the course of the next 12 months. So in order to be able to do that, we figured, well, we need a reference point of some kind. What are we actually trying to measure as individuals, or as a coach and match official, or as any other participant in the game? Now, on the refereeing side of things, we decided let's look at what is a referee profile might look like. So within this profile, we've identified a few things, and I'll go through those in a minute. But ultimately, what we were trying to do was look at if we have what we not necessarily deem the ideal referee, but it's more along the lines of here are the little pieces that make up refereeing in general for the most part. And these are the pieces that we'd like to see referees try and improve on from a technical perspective, a tactical perspective, and game management perspective. So I'll show what those look like in a little bit. And then, of course, the match review form, which I'll explain when we take a look at how it tied in. Okay, and these documents are available at the rugby.ca website under Match Official Development. So I'll show us where that link actually is. All right, so here's a bit of an image of what these actually look like, but because I know it's probably a little bit difficult to see, I'll just take us to the page in a second, knowing also that the referee review form is a 2-page document. So let's see if this works. Oh, that way. There we go. Okay. So I just wanted to outline that this document is also available on the website, and I'll show us that. But these are the 12 topics that we'll cover over the course of the rest of the year. And just a reminder of some of the dates. And an updated version of this, when it gets onto the website, will also include the registration links on here. But we are just waiting for that to be complete. So just a reminder of some of the dates. Our next one, and I'll come back to this at the end, but it'll be February 25th and 26th on our age grade variation, so refereeing under 19s and below. All right, so our Rugby Canada referee profile. What we looked at was 3 kind of pillars of refereeing, game management being the first, the technical aspects of decision-making being the second, and then, of course, the tactical factors of decision-making being the third. I apologize for that. It's a little bit to load. There we go. All right, so under each of these 3 kind of pillars, we have a bit of a description as to what is it we're kind of looking for from the referee here, or what is the purpose or meaning of tactical decision-making, right? So we described it as the ability of the referee to make decisions based on the context of the game in front of them. From a technical perspective, our accuracy in technical decision-making when there is a need to blow the whistle, right? And then finally, under game management, how the referee uses a variety of skills in order to create an environment for players to be successful. So within each of these profile pillars, we have our key factors within each one, and we have 5 in each, and we just wanted to find an easy number to reference, but I'll show you how those 5 are significant. But we came up with what we thought kind of encompassed game management. We had communication, establishing a positive environment, progression of sanctions, 0 tolerance for foul play, and there's one missing, so I've made a note to make sure we address that, and I'll get to it in a second. And then for technical, our key factors are tackler and tackle assist, clear release, and rolling away from the ball. Our arriving players are coming in through the gate and on their feet. Our defense is clearly onside at ruck. We see positive body position at the scrum, and we have clear numbers at the line out. And I'll get to we will touch on those individual technical pieces over the course of the next few months, and we'll see how they fit into the profile here in a minute. And then finally, for our tactical decision-making, we looked at our key factors of playing appropriate advantage, rewarding legal dominance at scrum, rewarding good contest and good clean out at the breakdown, rewarding teams with space that they've earned, and finally, contextual judgment. What does the game need when it comes to decision-making? So those are kind of like the the nuances of what we believe referees should be working on. And these will probably be adaptable over the course of the year, and we will have a review process going about making sure that these are actually what we want to have in this document. But where it led us to was creating our referee pre-match and post-match review form. So I've stolen quite a bit of pieces around the structure of this from World Rugby, from BC Rugby, and from other rugby nations who I have thanked individually. They're all very nice. So obviously name, if there is a coach and match official, who that person might be, who are the teams, what is the competition, and what is the date. So we will go through the nuances of filling this out, but ultimately what we're looking at is the three areas that we discussed. When we establish goals, we're going to look to establish them within those three key pillars. So having a goal from a technical perspective, having a goal from a tactical perspective, and finally having a goal from a game management perspective, right? And then looking at, and again, I will go into more detail about what kind of information we want to put in here. I'm just trying to show us the links at the moment. So on our review page, we now have a fillable, the PDF is fillable, which means that you as an individual can go back and say, you know what, I thought this was a concern of mine, was players were not arriving through the gate, or they were not arriving through their feet, but I was consistently applying defensive offside lines, that kind of stuff, right? So these are just some examples of what we can do, but what we did was we used the 5 key factors from each of these 3 pillars listed here. So this is why we came up with these 5, and here's how we're going to use them. So what we'll do is look at how we use this chart to help us with our review, look at areas where we thought we performed well, what are some of our work-ons, and how we might like to practice some of those things. So those are the topics we will look to discuss over the next 45 minutes or so. So that's more or less an outline of where we are and how we got here. Oh, sorry, I will show us on the, so in order to get to this website, obviously we go to rugby.ca, click on HQ, Match Official Development, brings us here. And then as we scroll down, we will see we have our profile. So our profile is just an image on the website available for people to download, as well as our webinar dates. And I believe our match review form should be up in the next day or so. So I will make sure that that information gets out there, but we're on the way to having the information quickly available for people. Okie dokes. Money. All right, so I hope that gives people an idea of where we came from. So now we're going to get into the gist of, okay, well, how do we use some of this information? Oh, sorry, there was one other thing I did want to touch on, was the fact that in creating this profile, the other thing we made sure that we were going to do was have all 12 of our webinars relate to these pieces in some way, right? So our pre-match planning and post-match review seminar, which we're doing right now, is related to the ability to use this information, right? And then our next one on age grade variations will show us how can we use game management, for instance. What are some pieces around communication, zero tolerance for foul play, progression of sanctions? Do they differ from what we might see in the senior game, right? So we'll touch on those pieces from a technical perspective, some of the key things we want to see at age grade, as well as from a tactical perspective, right? Contextual judgment, especially, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that these are the things we're hoping to touch on over 12 months, is a little bit on each of these 3 key pillars over the course of each one of these webinars. Some of them will be very specific, but they will touch on tactical, technical, and game management perspective, even if the topic is purely on, let's say, the scrum, for instance. Okay. Excellent. I don't know why I did that. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so back to pre-match planning. So pre-match planning actually starts with a preseason plan. Now, I didn't put together a preseason planning document because I think at the end of the day, what individuals feel is necessary for them to work on over the course of the season will vary greatly. Whereas I think in terms of what we're trying to accomplish within a referee, from this profile perspective, will be mostly similar. So what I've done is looked at, okay, well, how do we start with this season planning piece then? Well, let's look at some philosophical aspects of your refereeing plan. What are the big items you want to achieve in the year? That's basically the question we're trying to answer. And then as individuals, I would urge you to go and think of, well, what does that look like for me? So for example, what I did was I took the 3 key pillars we talked about earlier and put a goal in each of them that I think I can achieve over the course of a season, right? And these are more things that I put together a little bit on the spot, so I apologize if they seem incoherent, but what we're looking at is from a technical perspective, can I measure my accuracy at the breakdown improving by 50% by the end of the season? Well, in order to be able to measure that, I need my goal to be a little bit realistic in the sense that, well, how do I know which decisions I can keep track of in which games, right? So where I don't have video, access to video, it could be very, very difficult to accomplish this goal. So knowing what competition you're in and how you phrase your goals, a lot of work out there about SMART goals, and we will talk not specifically about that, but when we're looking at things, are they measurable? Are they achievable, right? And how can we make sure that we put together things that we are actually able to do, as opposed to just saying, well, I want to referee X game by the end of the year, right? From a tactical perspective, obtain a better understanding of what teams are trying to do and applying that knowledge to my decision making. A very generic statement, really. What does that actually mean? Well, you know, when we get into week-to-week stuff, that's where we can get a little bit more nuanced about, well, what does it mean to have a better understanding of what teams are trying to do? Is it that we have a better understanding of defensive alignments, or is it that we have a better understanding of, okay, when we're in situation X or situation Y, teams might be able to get away with this, that, or the other, right? And I don't mean get away with, but I just mean in terms of, is the infringement or the thing that we're looking at as material as we think it is, or is it more material than it might otherwise have been? So we'll look at a couple of examples of that. And then finally, from a game management perspective, to build better relationships with captains and use my downtime talk to work with them in order to achieve better outcomes with their help, right? So again, these aren't necessarily specific to me, but they're just ideas I threw down there. So ideas of okay, well, if we're going to try and achieve this, what are the things week to week we can work on? Okay, and we'll take a look at what those are. All right, so now we get into more specific goal setting for each match, right? So we're not looking at just technical goals in terms of, well, I will not call, or I will call all offsides I see, or I will call this. We're looking along the lines of things that are actionable, things that I can do during a game to help me ensure I make appropriate decisions. So we'll look at what that means. But let's just say this is the first game of the year, right? These are the pieces I put in. It really doesn't matter what the team is when I phrase it this way. But what I'll do is I'll come to, apologies. Nope, that didn't work either. Here we go. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so when we get back to here, what I've done is I've just created this here. So by the way, the fun thing about this PDF fillable document is that you can make these as long or as short as you want within each text box, which is nice. So what I've done is demonstrated a couple of things. One is what do you put in there? How do you put information in that you feel is going to help you? So a general statement about what did the match mean to you and the teams. First game of the year for both teams, as well as myself. It's an exhibition match, so it does not hold any significance to the league. It is rather an opportunity for everyone to become more game ready come the beginning of the season next week. Includes myself, done some work in the off season, but this will be my first opportunity to work on some of the goals for the year. Okay. I personally am a very wordy individual, and you'll notice that in this little technical box where I say, I'm going to focus on all safety aspects of the game today. Tackles below the shoulders, tacklers moving away, good body position, and binding at scrum. That personally works for me because I find the action of writing down my statements helps me remember them. However, some people just need keywords, and you'll see what I did at the last one was I personally wouldn't word it this way, but this might work for someone where they say from a game management perspective, my goal is to work on foul play equals 0 tolerance, but breathe. So the reason why I put it this way is because, again, this would work for someone potentially if this is what, you know, the format that they learn best from or retain information best from. So the most important part about having some sort of goal, advantage, ensure proper reward for non-offending team, space, keep defense honest, reward, go forward. Okay, the thing about having a goal is, okay, well, it's nice to have a goal, right? But how do I go about trying to accomplish it? So what I've done here is I've looked at, okay, well, in my technical goal, I'm going to look to make accurate decisions. In order to make accurate decisions, I need to ensure I'm running ball in line. Okay, so I'm looking at a process piece I think I can control in the game to see as much as possible to see the points of contacts from tacklers. At the scrum, I need to take my time and ensure I'm working with the front row on items we discussed prior to the match. Okay, some people prefer the word checklist, whatever that looks like. My point here is that when we look at the goal that we have, we can't simply say, well, I'm going to have zero tolerance for foul play. I need to look at it from the perspective of, okay, well, I need to then be able to do all the things that come with that, and those are the things I can control. Again, going back to this piece around ball and line running is a process that I undertake throughout the game to make sure I'm in the best position to see the things I need to see in order to be able to make accurate decisions from a technical perspective around safety. When I look at tactical advantage, I'm saying when advantage is on, work harder to get advantage over. So for me here, this would be an example of a mindset shift. Many of us will call advantage, and then we wait to see if advantage is going to happen. My mindset shift here is I put the arm out for advantage. My immediate reaction is now I need to work harder to help players get to a point where we can get to advantage over. That's my role when I call advantage. So having that mindset shift is something, a process that I can work on over the course of the game to ensure I achieve my goal of proper rewards for non-offending teams. And finally, I put time here as the keyword. And again, I tried to go back to, well, me personally, I like long sentences, but the person who likes keywords, from a game management perspective, they might have the word time, right? So they'll look at zero tolerance for foul play, but breathe, I need to take the time when I blow the whistle to make sure I'm thinking through what these decisions are. So we're not making rash decisions. It's not to say that we don't want to delay things or extend things, but my whistle time is my time is an expression I like to use, right? So ultimately, we're not letting goals dictate what we go about and do in the match. What we're doing is looking at the little process pieces that help us achieve these goals. If we maintain consistency in our process, hopefully what we end up having is a really good outcome. And then we'll see that these issues that we've maybe had from one game to the next, i.e. not applying advantage properly, should be resolved. Okay, so we'll come back to in between matches how we can use this information, but basically that's what we wanted to look at when we got to pre-match planning. So I described some of that here. We're looking for positive actions as well, things that I can control. So focusing on my running lines, focusing on my time, right? And then focusing again on, what was that last piece? Right, that mindset around working harder to get to advantage over, okay? So another really good example I like to use about these positive actions, right, is, well, we get a lot of feedback sometimes about a rival up breakdown. Okay, well, it's nice that I need to get there quicker. Sure, I get this, but guess what? I'm already running as fast as I can. So what gives, right? How do I get around doing this? So what are all the different process pieces of running, right? And when we run. So we're going to look at, okay, well, instead, my goal, how I'm going to achieve my goal is actually by doing these things. I'm going to improve my first 3 steps up off the mark, right? And we can get into, again, week to week, how we do these things. And finally, I'm going to start my movement before the ball is off the ground. I don't mean start sprinting across the field, but what I mean is I know the ball is going right off the base of the ruck. I'm going to start moving to the right before that ball's off the ground, and I get a little bit of a head start, right? So these are the little process pieces I was referring to when I talked about having positive actions that we can control, okay? And then what would be a word to help me achieve that in the game? Before ball, right? That might be a trigger in my mind to use to help me know that, or remind me, okay, I've got to get my feet moving before this ball is moving. and that'll help get me to that next phase, right? And so finding different ways throughout your planning process to look at, okay, these are the different things I can do to help me achieve these goals. Hopefully we can get to a really good place at that point. Okay, so that touches on our pre-match planning and how to use the document when especially first game of the year, right? So this is we don't really have a reference point other than our referee profile. Great. Now we've repped the game. We're gonna do our post-match review, and we will see how we can use the information from our previous match upcoming. All right, so most of us, when we go and referee on a Saturday or Thursday night or Tuesday night or whatever day of the week we're refereeing our matches, high school, not high school, most of us don't have access to audio, video, or audio-visual equipment and or technology and or anything else to do with being able to see or hear yourself. So what does a review look like in that case? So first, we're going to try and identify how we did with the goals. This requires us to take a different approach if we don't have video. And I would strongly urge us, even with video, to do some of these things, right? But we talked a little bit about my example of a season goal being to work with captains better over the course of the season. Okay, well, one of the things that we can do from week to week or just after a game or just, the day after a game is reach out to coaches. Reach out to our referee mentors, reach out to our coach and match officials, even if they didn't necessarily watch the game, and ask questions about things we think or things that we believe may have happened and how we might address them. And also, obviously, discussing issues with players and looking at how do we build relationships with some of these individuals who we will see, maybe not obviously the exact same people, but at the end of the day, the players are mostly doing a lot of the same things from a technical perspective, or trying to. How can we get a better cohesion between what we see as referees and what they are trying to achieve as players and establish a balance there? At the end of the day, there's a time and place for all of this, especially post-match, immediately post-match, especially in areas or games where you might have certain people who what's the word, react to pressure differently and are putting pressure on you as well. So time and space. Time is one of my keywords, right? Is it the time and the place right now? Time is a really good example of how we can use that to gauge, is this an appropriate time for me to have a conversation with someone, or does it need to wait? Okay, I often say this, and it's always difficult to do, but the best way to visualize, to be able to remember the actions that happened on the field, is actually to complete some of this stuff within 24 to 48 hours. Research shows that after that 48-hour period, we just tend to lose perspective on the things that we think we remember. And it's not to say that we're going to remember everything with clarity or not. Some people will obviously be different than others, but that's kind of like that window that tends to work best for most of us. All right, and then finally, we're going to use the checklist here to check them off, the ones that are most related to the incidences that we do recall, right? So, for example, here are the things. Now, what I did was, you will notice I put ticks in the boxes where I had a goal. So my goal in tactical was around advantage and the offside line, right? So rewarding teams with their space earned, playing advantage appropriately. Right, and I had one as consistent, and obviously my advantage as a concern, right? My technical, I had wanting to make sure that our tackles were safe and low, right? And we had good body position, that's run time, which is a thing that I addressed during the pregame. So what we're doing is looking for the ones that are most related, right? Foul play, obviously zero tolerance, found I was consistent there. And then establishing a positive environment. I put a concern because it's always a concern for me. Not necessarily, no, I'm kidding. It was, it's just an example of what we did. I will get to this one in a moment, okay? But what you will notice is that what I did not do was check off every single box, or because I didn't feel like there was a need to. A, because I wasn't working on it, so it might not have been something that came up. And if it was something that I thought went fine during the game, but wasn't a clear focus of mine, then I'm just going to leave it and park it for the moment and see if it needs to be something to address later on, okay? All right, now the next piece, and this relates to the one I was going to get back to later, is, okay, did something else come up that was important, right? Was there a consistent area that was a struggle or brought up as a point through the captains or players or coaches, etc.? I do want to really emphasize this point of looking at feedback as a reason to look into a situation. It doesn't mean that the players or the coaches were correct in saying that the referee did not manage or officiate the offside line accurately. It doesn't mean necessarily that all of it was material. But for example, if high school team A was constantly asking, what am I to watch? Asking me to watch the offside line. Was this due to the opposition always being offside? Was it immaterial? Did I not scan well enough? What are all the different things that led to that player having to question it? Sometimes it's a game tactic. Sometimes it's, well, I want to try and get the referee to milk us a penalty or buy us a penalty. Great. There is always gamesmanship in the game of rugby, and that's, the way it is when teams are trying to get an edge. No problems with that, right? But what I'm saying is that as referees, as much as we don't want constant chatter from players, nipping that in the bud and asking players not to address issues unless they go through their captain or at the appropriate time, great. But at the same time, in our mind, what we should be doing is reinforcing those points to ask ourselves, okay, is this something I need to pay more attention to? Or is it something I can address? Or is it something I can just leave for now, park it, and try and address it later if I have to, okay? And then finally, is this other thing that came up that was outside of what my goals, is it something that needs to be addressed immediately? So for example, you'll see what I did was I put this little arrow here on clear communication, okay? So if we go to this here, we'll see that same picture, okay? Both of those pictures are the same. All right, so things I thought I did well. All right, tacklers moving away, etc. Pleased with how the scrums went and the focus on body position with the front row. Excellent. Advantage was consistent. Game management, foul play was good with captains. Okay. And again, what I did was I tried to reinforce the fact that we all learn differently. Full sentences in this first point works for me. Okay. Much shorter sentences in our tactical, and then finally just keywords in our game management piece. So again, how you use this from a language perspective is entirely up to you, right? Where I got to with the second piece around highlighting clear communication as a priority is that in my work-ons for my next match, I identified an issue with signaling, okay? And again, I tried to use the same form of language where I've got full sentences for this first one, okay? With the scrum, I still want to ensure we have clear pictures of good position after the ball enters the scrum, where some shifts under pressure, like to ensure I can identify quicker on the field to address them with the players, blah, blah, blah. All right. But again, shorter sentences for the second one, and then finally keywords for the last one. Maybe would have been ideal to switch this around and have the priority work on be something that was easier to explain with the lingo here, but here we are. So clear language, game management. We're looking at clear signals. And what we'll do is see, okay, well, what does this mean now going into my next match in a moment? All right, so signaling being the issue that was very important, and we'll get into why that was in a minute. Okay, so when we look at what we took away from our first match or a previous match as the things or areas that we need to look to improve on, what are the steps we can take between week to week in order to ensure that we're trying to progress in some of these areas? I think this is an area that with refereeing across Canada, we can all do a little bit better job of trying to implement something new in what we do. So what we're gonna have a really, really quick chat about, and there's a ton of work out there on the topic, but what is purposeful practice, right? So if we go back to that example that I gave about the 3 steps off the mark, right, and moving before the ball, right? So we're going to look at, well, how can I practice that from week to week? With my feet off the mark, I can try and go to club training sessions, run some lines in their unopposed sessions, see if I can practice those first 3 steps that I take. I can work specifically on moving a little bit before the ball in that scenario as well, so I can do both of those things in that one session. I can use some gym time to work on improving on my power and strength to improve on those first 3 steps. So those are the things, these are the, again, we go back to, well, what are the process pieces, okay? So I've got a goal of getting to the next breakdown quicker, right? Well, the process piece to doing that is to get off the mark a little bit sooner and to improve on my first 3 steps off the mark. And then in order to improve those 2 things, well, these are the things I'm going to do at practice time, right? So on a Tuesday or a Thursday, these are the things I'm going to do to help me try and improve in those areas. Okay, and then in the example offsides and potential need to improve the scan, so the issue that we brought up with the high school player complaining about the offside line, right, is we identified, you know what, I do need to scan better. Okay, well then let's see if we can get a group of referees together, and we're going to go out onto a field, set up some drills, and work on some scanning using flashcards, right? So setting up some cones, looking at identifying some space, putting up some flashcards, and seeing if we can use those to try and improve on our refereeing from week to week. Okay. And then a couple more examples. So if we go back to, sorry, I apologize. If we go back to here, we're going to look specifically at, well, at the scrum, right? I want clearer pictures of good body position. All right, so I'm going to go and work with my local club's training session on days they are working on scrummaging, and work with the front row on identifying body movements under pressure. So after the ball's in is when I found I needed to address some of these issues, let's say with my perceived pictures of body position as the ball was going in and pressure was starting to mount in the scrum. What was I seeing, and how can I improve on seeing that? Okay, from a tactical perspective, when we looked at advantage, right? So we identified the need to work on calling it only when it's on. Too many times that I played advantage and then advantage was not over because there was never really advantage to start with. Okay, so advantage was never on, but I called advantage because it's a reflex. How do I get rid of the reflex? Well, maybe I'll watch a little bit of rugby today or tomorrow or the next day, all right, and look at, can I work as the referee while watching this in the game to identify appropriate opportunities for advantage? How many times did the referee say advantage over when they maybe should never, no advantage gained, coming back to an infringement when they should never have said advantage to start with? Can we identify those situations week to week as the individual? Okay. And then game end, this is my favorite, okay, we identified we need clear signals. The players were confused in the game. We needed clear signals. Great. I'm going to go in front of my mirror and I'm going to work on some of my signals. Excellent. Or I'm going to go into my game. I'm going to join a bunch of referee friends. And as we work on our flashcards, we're also going to practice our signals when we get to particular breakdown situations as a separate drill. That kind of thing. Okay. So finding ways to be purposeful in our practice to make sure that we are looking at improving week to week. We're not using the game to practice the things we want to work on. We're using the limited time that we all have, and we all have very limited time to get ready for our everyday club community game, is the little things that we can do in our everyday life, potentially. As you're brushing your teeth is a great time to give your penalty and knock on and not rolling away signals, etc. Okay. Right, so those are just some examples, and again, I know we could get into so much more depth about examples of all this, but at the end of the day, I do want to leave us some time for some questions. Okay, so I'm just going to touch real quick on our post-match review if we do have video. Now, what I want us to remember is video is a fantastic tool. There's nothing like seeing yourself out in action and what you really look like when you're out in the field. I'm sure we all remember the first time we saw ourselves on tape refereeing a game. But at the same time, it's only one way for us to continue to look to improve, right? So having the conversations with other stakeholders in the game, going to a coaching course and learning about what coaches are trying to do, going to training sessions, and watching rugby are all great other great ways to look to improve. And attending these webinars, of course. So when it is available, though, here's how some of the things we can do in terms of how to use this video. So one aspect is just to look at individual decisions we remember being areas of concern. This is especially true when we don't have time necessarily in our 24 to 48 hours post-match to watch the game. Not to scare anyone, but when I really want to do a thorough review, it's hours. It's not just sit and watch the game once, it's sit and watch it multiple times. So it's hours of review, whereas we don't all necessarily have that time, but we still want to maximize the use of the video when we have it. So using it for those particular areas that we thought were a concern in that previous match. Okay, so that's one thing we can do. The other is identifying appropriate pictures of positive actions and strong body position. So examining video for body position at the jackal with that first defending arriver, right? So making sure we see good body position. Are they clearly on the feet? Are they clearly going for the ball and not the body? And again, we'll get into technical nuances at later dates of these webinars. All right, and are the pictures of the scrum body positions, are they in good, strong pushing positions, or are their hips above their shoulders, or are they not having, or are they not putting enough weight on their feet, too much weight forward, that kind of thing, right? So looking at those pictures and making sure we positively reinforce them in our minds. Okay, and the last one, seeing if our decisions are received and whether we are being accurate within the context of the game. So this is where we can get a little more nuance with our decision making. So what I'm going to do is show us a few examples of this real quick, and you guys can follow along in the handouts. You should be able to download the videos or click on the videos and use them. So we're just going to watch clip 1, and what I'll do is I'll play it through, and then what I'll do is play it again and explain what my rationale was. So this is a game I refereed this past fall of 2018, whoops, sorry, between two teams out here in BC. All right, so there's no audio, unfortunately. I think there's just a few more seconds. I'll let this play out. Then, like I said, I'll go back and play it in a moment. Okay, so I'll play it again and just walk through the context. So what I was looking at with these clips is, okay, well, within my review, what are the things I want to address? And if I look at these 3 things, what was an area of concern in this game? An area of concern in this game was allowing teams that wanted to play to be able to play, right? I also wanted to identify appropriate pictures of positive actions in strong body position. So the penalty in this situation is for side entry on the attacking team, with the first support player coming clearly in the side. Okay, so we'll look at that. And then finally, let's see how my decision is received and whether I'm accurate within the context of the game. So the context of this game is, this is the first 5 minutes after kickoff. So what we have here is ball carrier going into the tackle, right? And then we will see our first arriver for black, I'll call them, coming in through the side, right? Perhaps something I could have gotten away with given the number of support players coming into contact. But my bigger concern is the next decision, right? So clearly my arm is up one way. Black player whose penalty is not his, quick taps the ball and then throws the ball away. And my penalty was for throwing the ball away. Now, when we look at the body language of the team in white, was there ever an inkling that they were going to quick tap this ball once it was placed on the ground and go quickly? No one even looked at the player to say that they threw the ball away, and yet here I am penalizing them. So within my plan of ensuring that teams had an opportunity to play, I made a decision here that might not have been accurate given the context of the game. Could certainly have had a chat with the player, but didn't necessarily warrant allowing the white team now to have an attacking opportunity on the opposition's 5-meter line. So those are the questions that video can really help us take a look at and address. Okay, in the second clip, we get more of the same in terms of looking at the perceived issues that might have happened. So again, like I said, areas of concern, something that players told me was that in the game, I might not have been accurate enough with side entries. So what I did was I looked at the game and I saw, okay, well, actually, I was dealing with side entries. And here's another example of where we did that. And it's tough to see that the very back end, right, we'll see the white player taking away black player from the ruck. So we'll just look at that one more time. You'll see the white player coming in here and removing the black player who's not a part of the ruck from in front of where the tackle had occurred. Right, so I look at that situation as great. Body language of the players is fully accepting of the decision, something I clearly remember in the game. The context was, yes, I'm taking away an attacking opportunity, but it clearly prevented a defender from coming in line. It was something I had discussed with them as an attacking team earlier in the game as well, right? And it was an area that we were able to clean up a little bit. Oh, sorry. Okay, and finally, the third clip was great. So had a couple side entry penalties now. And then we have one more, right? And sorry, I apologize. I clipped that one incorrectly. But what I'll do is I'll just stop it here. So we have white ball carrier tackled here, and then our white support player clearly in the side, right, to take out that first arriving defender, right? So what I didn't show was the fact that we went time off. I apologize for that. What I'll do is I'll hopefully change the third clip onto the downloadable video for us to take a look at. But I did go time off and have a chat with the captain about arriving through the gate, right? So that was something that was an issue for the game and something that was addressed throughout. So when we look at these 3 points that I brought up here, I was looking at individual decisions that were an area of concern. I was identifying some pictures of positive actions. So these are obviously not positive actions necessarily, but I'm looking at, am I accurate with what my pictures are? And then finally, I'm looking at my decisions and are they being properly received? And I've identified that in 2 instances they were, but not in the first. In the context of the decision in the first, was clear that that decision probably didn't need to be made in that instance. I probably could have resorted to some other form of game management in order to ensure we didn't have that same action by the player again. Good for him though, being a 9, why not? Okay. So what I put here is a few notes for our coaches and match officials in order to help us identify some other area, in order to help us use these resources to aid officials in their development. So just a couple of things for CMOs, if they're watching, to take away from this. The first is there's a variety of ways that we can use the match official review form, but there's 2 important aspects to it, okay? So the first is that we want to use the boxes with the colors as a reference point, not as a grading mechanism. So we don't want it to be, well, you did not referee this well at all, and this one you suffered here, et cetera, et cetera. The rationale being that we are looking for referees to identify their own areas of improvement. We're looking for them to identify ways to practice those skills, and then we're looking to see if they can show progress in their next match. The role of our CMO here is not to say whether or not the referee is being accurate or not in some of these areas. The goal of the CMO here is to try and look at how can I help the referee with the right questions in order for them to come to these conclusions themselves, right? And then the second is that we need to reference, for the most part, what the referee has identified. So if we're going to have conversations about things in the game, let's make sure that they're things that the referee was working on throughout that match. However, there's always exceptions, like everything else, especially where we feel there is a safety concern. So if there were things that came up in the game that as a CMO I felt I strongly needed to have a word with that player about, that referee about when it came to foul play, please, let's make sure we do that, right? Because those are areas of the game we need to ensure we address, okay? Finally, there's a couple different ways, again, we can use this. Okay, so we can either use it only as a document filled in by the referee and we ask questions. So as a coach and match official, I can say, great, the referee went through the time in the last couple of days after the match to go through and fill in this match review form as best as they can. I'm going to ask some questions based on what they think they need to work on and whether or not we've identified the right things. The other side of it too is identifying, are these the appropriate ways to practice that skill? Right? And it's not to say we're going to be able to go in, week out, and do all of these things. What it means is that when we have moments, are we being purposeful with it? So those are the questions that CMOs can really help referees with. And then obviously the other way is to, the CMO can fill in their own form and then have the referee fill in their form, and they can compare and contrast. I mean, if you want to get really technical, we can have the referee fill it in first, and then have the CMO share their version of it to look at how do we achieve some sort of consistency in interpretation. Okay, so consistency in interpretation is going to be important over the course of a year for a referee to make sure that they're looking at the correct, I don't want to say correct, but they're looking at, let's say, that referee profile as a means of balancing out what it is that they feel like they need to work on versus having the kind of what is a correct decision when it comes to some of the technical aspects of the game. Okay, and then we can have the CMO pull from the referee what it is they would like to improve based on that joined kind of discussion. Obviously, it takes a little more time to do the second way, but things that CMOs can use. Okay. All right, finally, and I know we're all at 10 to 5 already, but player welfare. So I just want to make sure we all understand that we have zero tolerance for foul play, and this is more of just using this opportunity as a reminder for foul play purposes, that we do still have some resources available, okay? So the first is the 2017 Rugby Canada Law Implementation Guide. Nothing really has changed from this document from a technical perspective when it comes to decisions of foul play. So I've put the YouTube link here and it's up on our website, but basically on this site, you will still have what is a dangerous tackle penalty decision only, what are dangerous tackles that need yellow card sanctions, what are dangerous tackles that require red card sanctions, okay? And then a reminder on the rest of the law trials at the time that are now currently implemented into law. The biggest thing we can get out of this is just reinforcing those pictures of decisions that need to be sanctioned with a penalty or a yellow card or a red card, okay? And then finally also our World Rugby Laws website, which has a couple of areas that we can review. The most pertinent one being law application guidelines, right? So there's some guidelines that World Rugby has issued in terms of how do we referee. Current law is the latest one from October 2018, and it is on foul play, specifically high tackles and contact around the neck, whether it's by the ball carrier or the clean out. Okay, and we will get into some of that stuff in the next couple of webinars. And we can also go back into this reckless and accidental tackle, where we look at the definitions of sanctions for yellow cards, red cards, and penalty only, as well as these are the same videos that are on the Rugby Canada YouTube page, but always good to get some reinforcement on that. Okay, so those are some areas that we need to make sure we have as part of our review process, is making sure that we do constantly work towards ensuring foul play is an area we are addressing, and this will be reinforced over the course of the year. But if anyone has any concerns around game management when it comes to foul play at any time, please feel free to reach out. So with that, that is our end of our presentation. So what I'm happy to do is take a few questions, and I can probably stick around for a few minutes after 5. But what I will do is ensure that we all have an opportunity here to put some questions down. If I don't answer your question, what I can do is take a look at what's the word I'm looking for? Addressing it separately in a message if I can get an email address or something off you. Okay, so question away. We've got a few minutes. Yeah, so Chris Asmus, everyone knows Chris. Chris had a good point. He said not letting goals impacting outcomes, right? So he makes a great point there where when we go back into goal setting, what we don't want to do is ensure that our sole focus in our matches is around, I'm just going to try and find that slide real quick. We don't want our goals to dictate what it is that we do every minute when we're out on the field and becoming solely focused on them. So part of what I was trying to get at with our pre-match planning is that our goals are really just the most important part being the how will I accomplish it and focusing on those process pieces. What I don't want to do is go into a game and only look at foul play, advantage, and safe tackles. Obviously, there's a lot of other things going on, and we need to make sure we're doing our best to try and keep an eye on as much as possible. Okay. Peter was asking, is attendance of the webinar suggested in them, and to act as suggested in them, be part of individual grade reviews and as part of referee development with respect to current level 2 clinics, etc. Okay, so great question, Peter. What we're going to do is I would certainly say that for those who are in their level 2 process to acquire their World Rugby level 2 match official accreditation, if they look to try and tick off some boxes when it comes to pre-match planning, post-match review, this would definitely tick off those boxes, which is great. And certainly anything that they do off the field that is part of that 6-match review program for them to complete in order to obtain their accreditation, this would go for that, absolutely. So Jeff was asking if there are general or specific areas of focus that have been identified this year. Yeah, so when we, oops, sorry, wrong thing. When we look at the profile, what we're going to do is say that the areas of focus that we want referees to focus on are not necessarily the technical areas of the game, Jeff. What I would like us to look at is how within these key factors can we look to improve on, right? So we're looking at these as process pieces to improve on some of the areas of the game we'd like to see us as referees improve on. But in general, I think where we do need to establish more consistency is in our dealing and management of foul play. That was a specific one that came out. And then we'll take a look at our contextual judgment. And that's a really tough one because what we're asking referees to do is look at the situation of the game like I did, let's say in that clip number 1, and say, God, did I really need to blow the whistle there or not, right? So we'll take a look at some of that. But I think what the bigger focus, Jeff, should be is, let's see if we can use this as a basis and a foundation to establish some consistency within our review process and our process for trying to improve as referees. And then what we can do is make sure that these are actually what we need to be touching on, and that'll take a bit of a review at the end of the year. Okay, hope that answers that question, Jeff. Matt was asking if the form is available. Yes, it is available because you found it. So let's go to the website now so that everyone gets a gander. Now I think I might have to refresh this page. But our fabulous communication staff was kind enough to put the referee match review form here as a downloadable PDF. So you'll see once you click on this, the PDF opens, and then you can download the PDF from there. Okay, great. Glad that worked out. I have one more question here, so we'll certainly get to that. So is there an appetite at the provincial levels to adopt the RC pre or post plans, or would one continue to use the platforms provided by the provincial level? So Derek, you're asking this question from BC, which I know, which is great. So what I would do is encourage you guys to continue on keeping on with what Chris has started with you guys this year. Much of the process that I've stolen here has to do with what Chris has done with you guys, which is great. He learns from me, I learn from him, and it's a pretty good working relationship. So what I would do is encourage you guys to keep on with what you're doing, and then what he and I will ensure we do is make sure come the off season, we're in communication about the different things that we can help streamline to make sure that those referees in BC are prepared in September in order to be able to, not fall in line, but certainly streamline the things that we've been talking about here with what you guys are currently doing. But don't get me wrong, what you guys are doing is fantastic. So happy for you guys to stay there. Excellent. Okay. That seems to be it for questions at the moment. So I think I will leave it at that. But if anyone has any burning questions they need addressed, please feel free to fire me an email, or which should be on the registration page of the thing. And I should have put it up on here, but I will do that for the post-webinar posting. And then we'll go from there. So thank you again very much for the hour, folks. We will be back here tomorrow evening for this presentation en français, where I get to practice my French again. I haven't done that in a while. And again, on the 25th and 26th of February, I should probably go into that real quick, just so we can take a look at the schedule. 25th and 26th, where we will take a look at our age grade variation, so refereeing under 19, rugby, and below, some of the different nuances of game management, technical decisions, and tactical decision making around that. Great, thanks folks, have a great evening, and we'll be chat soon.